Right, so hi there. So we're now moving on to our next session. So this is going to be around the modern application access. So this is really looking at Azure Remote App. So for those that are kind of viewing in from home or office, just because a quick way of introduction, which people have already heard a few times so far. My name is Phil Mercer, so I'm the Solutions Director at PowerON. So I would say I'm technical but not the techie, which is where I have my partner in crime. This might get a bit old.
I guess this makes me the techie. So hi everyone, my name's Steve Beaumont. I'm Product Development Director at PowerON Platforms. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for my sins, which means I work in the System Center, Cloud and Data Center arena. So working with the product teams, giving feedback, generally seeing some of the new things, how it can be best used to actually serve users and customers.
So like we've been doing with the other sessions as well, I'm just going to give a bit of a kind of a summary update and kind of what is Remote App from a kind of a business and kind of a development context, and how does it fit into some of the Microsoft broader technology sides. So, this is really addressing, those common challenges that are not new, and different ways that they've been dealt with in the past, maybe actually via using some of the Microsoft remote desktop sessions or some of the capabilities there. But this is really an evolution of that technology set, leveraging some of the Microsoft Cloud services. But how are you managing the delivery of applications to BYOD? Whether they be mobile devices, whether they be kind of inconsistent operating environments, because it's the users bringing in their own personal kind of maybe PC, tablet, different bits and pieces, or simply allowing you to kind of manage more of a consumerization of your IT services, whether that's supporting home working or remote access, or many different kind of forms of fundamentally wanting to get access to apps on many different mediums. This is responding then to that kind of dynamic business needs, so the whole ability to support seasonal temporary workers, vendors, new employees, different bits and pieces, and really just helping move potentially from a CapEx to OpEx, depending on how you manage the financial investment. Because within the Azure Remote App, this is fundamentally treated like cloud services, where you pay on a subscription user basis. You can buy packs of users effectively for pre-committed times, which means that if you are an organization that want to kind of more work on a CapEx, that is absolutely fine, but it does give you that flexibility. And this is really allowing also simplicity as we move into the more modern operating systems. If you are having applications which do still present maybe conflicting issues for whatever reasons, whether that be Internet Explorer compatibility sides, or whether that be different reasonings why, this is an alternative fashion as well to manage that compatibility issue. Remove that headache whilst that is being dealt with in the background by corporate IT. And really, part of this as well is ensuring that although this is Azure service, it is really around ensuring it does meet compliance to your business standards. And we'll touch on that as what I actually mean. So, desktop virtualization. This isn't something new for Microsoft. They've been doing this now for quite a long time. You're sure being familiar with terminal services and other bits and pieces in terms of that session-based computing, moving up to kind of remote desktop services as it came through in 2008, 2012. And certainly that has been heavily improved as we kind of came into the Windows Server 2012 stack, and eagerly looking forward to more improvements within 2016. From an on-premises perspective, we saw that really in kind of two main aspects, and this typically was getting all called VDI by Microsoft, which for me is always a confusing manner, because VDI is, for me, where they've kind of referred to it here, or how we've referred to it here.
What I tend to refer to as traditional VDI and modern VDI.
VDI, yeah, but for me, because that's session-based, it's not necessarily quite the same. But semantics and obviously terminology, right? This is really then looking at the ability to say, I'm actually delivering a true client OS experience, or whether I'm kind of synthesizing that experience to either give the users just application streaming, so whether you're kind of a Zen app type customer, or kind of a representative kind of Zen desktop type of model, and going through to the fuller Zen desktop type capabilities, but not necessarily as far in terms of the kind of the level of capability you can go to. And then really what we're doing is we're seeing this now expand. So we see this with two main services that have been introduced into the Azure kind of offering stack, and we are waiting as well for maybe new announcements for more Windows as a service, or kind of potentially as that kind of, even as we talked around the update branch model, the ability to consume Windows 10 desktops from Azure, not publicly available, but certainly in the rumour mill, as it were. And we see this in two aspects. So you see the ability to either take the remote, full session-based desktops and deploy that as an infrastructure service on Azure, or actually take and consume more as a platform service or a SaaS service, the actual remote app capability as well. So not necessarily then having to worry about managing the associated infrastructure to that. Microsoft is going to support you in terms of how that comes through. Though, that said, there are effectively a number of deployment models. Fundamentally though, the Azure Remote App component that we're really going to be focusing on today is just think about this as your device, your application anywhere on any device. Really around enabling your users to kind of be more productive and effective. And as I say, this is literally multiple different types, whether it be more kind of cloud, web app type sides, maybe complex business applications, standard productivity tools, or effectively any line of business application. And we'll show some of this as well in terms of some of the demo sites.
I think it's that bit around that whole protecting the company side of things. Rather than having to give out maybe not Dynamics, but maybe an Access database, here's some customer information, go run it on your non-IT device because you need to do your job. Actually we can contain that, keep control of it within our boundaries, and just publish you access to that application.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is that kind of side around, well actually what does that look like from a deployment model? So, that kind of idea around typically applications which can cause lots of compatibility, challenges in terms of how they're delivered and used by individual users. Within the remote app actual technology set, there are two main deployment profiles. You can either kind of run a quick cloud-only deployment up. This is primarily for consumers that just want to be able to kind of consume Office on demand. So primary Office Professional, 2013 and up now, sorry, so that really should say above. And this is basically managed and provisioned by the Microsoft services. So an important part here is whereas it effectively has that automatic maintenance of the image. So OS, apps, always up to date.
Really good for things like them seasonal workers and stuff. So if you've got a high influx of people coming in immediately, you haven't got time to issue devices, They only need to be task workers, so they're working on Office documents. Just give them access on any device to a secure, delivered application with the data still within your realm.
Easy
nothing
way
to worry about, nothing to maintain.
Absolutely, easy way to get them productive and get them kind of up and running quickly. Now for those users, now this is a scenario potentially as Steve was kind of alluding to where there is that kind of use within the seasonal workers. A more common type of side, if you're saying using for more general business purposes, is really we see this into the remote app. Hybrid deployment. So this is the ability then for you to load up your own actual kind of associated app images, but this does then leverage a level of management and support that you need to consider. This is no different to what you would be doing if you were maintaining your own kind of effectively application delivery side, but Microsoft does not hold responsibility for you updating, patching, etc. in terms of your relevant kind of maintenance of that application package.
The difference is though, is I'm only responsible at that level for designing an OS with some apps installed. I don't have to worry about all the intricacies involved with remote desktop services, brokers, licensing servers, they all go out the window. I don't have to worry about something to run it on.
Yeah.
I just need to know, I want Windows Server with some applications installed that I want to deliver out.
Yeah, so you can spin up and spin down as many as you like. There are different types of sides. You have base level of kind of challenge, and we'll talk around that a little bit. An important part here is, you do have, and we kind of are going to be touching on this and talking about this a little bit more in the next session, or the next session after that, I should say, really around that kind of identity. But it is common credentials. You're using your corporate kind of side to log onto that, but importantly, it is your on-premises network in terms of the file stores, where the actual data is held. So even though this is an Azure service, this is the ability to access into your data center services. So it is the presentation layer that's primarily being managed.
This is the whole thing with that whole hybrid deployment. I'm using a mixture of cloud services and my on-premises infrastructure. I want to be able to reach back from Azure and access my data. I don't have to lift and shift everything, just the actual presentation layer goes up there.
Now, not to take away from the Azure Remote App, but of course that's really what we're kind of talking around today, but this remote app service can be deployed as an on-premise model as well, should you need, and this is again a part of the Windows Server Remote Desktop Services function. So this is the Azure type models that you have to choose from, but as I say, this is really leveraging in that Windows Server capability, but fundamentally leveraging all the benefits of the Microsoft platform in terms of scalability, automatic maintenance, but really around ensuring that you have a very accessible and reliable service that's delivered through. Now this, from a point of view of application delivery, so if you're going on from a BYOD type of structure, there is the actual remote desktop app. Now this in terms of comes in different forms, looking at the actual device profiles that we're talking about, but fundamentally the app supports basically all main primary OS environments that you consider across different phone types, as well as into primary operating system environments. And really this is also making sure that you kind of keep that consistent Windows experience across any that kind of bring your own device type of aspects.
It always makes me chuckle when I say Internet Explorer and calculator running on an iPad and Mac OS.
Yeah. Now, the interesting side of here really is it is around kind of ensuring that you keep it with secure access. It does support both the actual remote desktop sessions if you want to deliver more of a fuller desktop experience, so thin clients are the bits and pieces potentially supported with this. And that kind of remote app programs, though, of course, is supported. So, whereas we see the different types of deployments side, now this is a, say, non-universal app type format. However, they are now releasing a universal app format of this, which is still technically available, but it's in the works in terms of it's more consistent and more kind of consumer ready or business ready type of form.
I'm going to be using it in a minute in the demos.
Yeah, so there's mainly around size and some of the bits and pieces, but it is rapidly coming. So then we see that ability, like Steve mentioned in some of the early sides, around the IoT type devices, where you can have that element of a very kind of light, thin desktop, thin client support, just an ability to effectively put down a full, rich Windows experience onto a very minimal hardware, effectively device profile. This also, as well, is, although this actually comes as an app, so you can go in and access it as an app, if you're running this on a kind of, say, normalized desktop, you can load this so it kind of presents itself as a locally installed app. So you don't always have to launch it from here, but you do have a consistent kind of access profile that you can work across any device effectively. So just in terms of, say, we do have that aspect around the cloud-only and hybrid. Also, though, there is a profile in terms of the types of levels of use within this, and this is more around the type of application that you are effectively pushing down. So just so you're aware, there are kind of multiple tiers within the remote app service. This is whether you're, say, just doing maybe base, kind of standardized line of business, lightweight kind of applications, you can get away with the basic. But if you're needing something with more grunt, you can move to standard, or even actually there is higher tiers that you can go to should you need to. But main productivity, kind of information worker type style, and if you're needing kind of more CAD and other elements as well, there's effectively tiers. As I say, this does start basically have an introductory level price. I always would encourage to actually get this as a proper price from your licensing provider, as there are always discounts associated when you buy under an enterprise model. But the entry level price effectively does include 40 hours of access. You can have then an overage, and this does also cap out when you go to a certain level. So typically it's another kind of 20 to 40 hours on top, then hits you into your actual capped usage. So depending on how regularly these apps are being accessed is whether you're going to push in to the maximum price, or say the minimum price, or there in between. Now, considering in terms of the different types, Steve's going to actually give us a bit of a demo, but given the fact that this is obviously also about the loading of images and other bits and pieces, there will be a few Blue Peter moments as we kind of walk through the demo side. But really this is just kind of then talking around what is the kind of typical management and application cycle. So how does this typically compare, if I was going to compare this to my current service, maybe I'm using Citrix, maybe I'm using kind of traditional application delivery. So actually how do we walk through this? So the cycle, as we see there, we really kind of start with that ability to select your image. So whether you actually want to do custom applications, what you're actually doing in terms of around role-based access or kind of different sides around how that's kind of coming through, and anything in terms of creating customizations to that image should you need to apply.
This is one of them things where it's not demo worthy, because you just sit there and watch me for 2 hours installing some applications, creating an image, packaging it up, and then pushing it up to the service. One thing I will say is, if you have an Azure, you'll have an Azure subscription if you want to use this, but actually use a VM in Azure to build your images. It's already there, then you don't have to worry about having to create it on-premise and upload 80 odd gigs worth of data up into Azure. It's a case of just take it from one data store to another and you're done.
Yeah. So we then would see ourselves, and actually once we work through the actual process of the image, we would look to then start to publish that app. And this is where I mentioned there around how you want that app to be presented. whether you want it to be presented as effectively just a general published app within the remote app kind of list of available resources, or whether you actually want this in via the start menu and general kind of paths to look exactly like it was locally installed, so from most typical users, they wouldn't know the difference effectively. Now we will demo that as well, so as you'll be able to show through. Now this is a little bit around how you kind of would go through this. So this is a little bit of look around the hybrid in terms of some of the aspects of VNet. But this is basically then talking around, well actually, as I go then to these more custom deployment models, what do I have to need to consider around the different types of authentication that's kind of coming through with that, and then also around, well actually, how does the hybrid deploy? So there is a level of networking kind of considerations that you need to have. Not going to necessarily steal too much of Steve's thunder on that in terms of as we go through, but this is just kind of considerations. But it's a fairly logical walkthrough, and that's hopefully should give you some insight in terms of how that will typically work. And of course, you would then work through the aspect of utilising, evaluate, consume. Basically, it's in situ. Your users are starting to work with this, starting to look around, well actually, what is my profile of use for my business? Do I need to consider and do I need to manage or make changes? So generally supported clients, different things normally associated with application data, so storage, sharing, and really just ensuring that actually, how is your user experience coming through with different things around user profiles. And as we kind of see this, you would then naturally come back to the fact of, well actually, do I need to make updates? Do I need to upload changes? Do I need to effectively manage and maintain? And bring yourself back around into effectively the full cycle.
I think it's also that idea, because as you said, the cloud-based deployment, Microsoft looks after all of that lot. If you're doing that whole hybrid one, you're still responsible for the patching and the maintenance. Now it could be a case of you say, well fine, we're going to use a patching system and deploy and update the patches, or you just regularly update, refresh your gold image, and then basically just roll it back out across the current Azure Remote App subscription that you have, and basically drain stop and update the base image with new applications or just updates.
So you can see, in terms of the actual profile around how this is going through, it is, fairly common thread to what you would see from a typical application management cycle. But we will start to demo this. I think one of the key things here is we're certainly starting to see this kind of option pick up on-prem, but also in Azure, because actually we're starting to see this is typically investments that customers may already have landed. Do you own RDS or terminal services type client access licenses today? RDS, client access licenses technically. A lot of people still refer to it as TS. And really, is this something then that you can leverage? Because it's pretty stable, it's got a good kind of actual network protocols in terms of actually the experience around the kinds of stuff, and actually it would be a great demo in terms of showing some of the CAD presentations around how that works, just so you see this isn't something that, whereas maybe in traditional sites, I've got to use more advanced application streaming technologies because it just won't get the user experience. It is there. It's really more around your kind of scenarios for use within your business, fixed desktop, mobile workers, all that kind of good stuff. But the technology that is presenting a lot of options to how people start to bring that through. So, without further ado, I will kind of effectively hand over to Mr. Beaumont so he can give you an actual insight into what this looks like.
Awesome. So, if I haven't lost my mouse plugin.
It's on top of your keyboard.
Ah. Get rid of some of that. So I'm going to drop onto my phone in a second and show you some of the different access methods, because as we said, is that whole universal Windows platform app that's coming through and it's currently in preview. But we can also start at where we'd start to do the management of this. So, bring up both portals. So with it being an Azure service, we can obviously, quite rightly, start within the Azure portals. So within the Azure portals, we should have a collection of different services. So if I go and look for my remote app, or not. Go back to the old portal, definitely know it's there. So we have the remote app services. So this is obviously a collection I've pre-built previously. So this is my main collection. The difference is we have the template images. So I can have a multitude of different ones, and I can assign each one to an individual remote app collection. So there's nothing to stop me saying having one that's for sales teams, one that's for remote mobile workers, another one for IT admins, each with their different application sets, different performance policy profiles, depending on how we want to actually configure that. It also means that we can pre-stage our template images, and we can basically then link them to a collection that's already in use and update them fairly easy. So, for example, at the minute, this is our live one. If I wanted to go and update this one, I'd be able to choose, right, fine, I want to swap to my test drive image, give the user 60 minutes after the update, so they'll start to get notification that they're going to get signed out, or we could be really harsh and just say, no, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, we want to do this now, I want to go to bed. Click OK, and that will begin the process of actually removing the servers and the templates and the infrastructure that we currently have and updating it with the new one. Now, when we have that actual image in place and our collection created, we can actually do the usual logical things such as seeing what the usage profile is, who currently has access. So we have a few people assigned to this demo environment, and then what applications are published to this actual set of users. So these are the applications that we currently have. So some of them you can see are going to be standard things. So yes, Office is in there. So this is exactly the same principle as the cloud-based deployment. But then we've added in things like Visual Studio, WinZip, or some of the applications I'll use as a demo, things like the drawings, which is the SolidWorks viewer as such. Now, I can start to look and say, well, actually, I want to start to use another program. I want to make that available. So if it's something that's sat within the start menu, it makes it fairly easy to say, well, fine, I just want to make sure that I've got, for example, Minecraft published. Now, Minecraft won't actually work at the moment, mainly because Minecraft requires that you have not just the GPU, it's the language type, not the CUDA support. My mind has gone totally blank. It has to have a certain support for a rendering engine that I don't know why I can't remember it at this moment in time. However, with advancements in technology, so as we start to look around things like Server 2016, where they do bring in support for that, then the logical theory would be that Microsoft, as they start to update their backends, move away from just using Server 2012 R2, which this is based on at the minute, up into things like Server 2016, we should gain support for things like that. But that's as difficult as it is to add a new application. From a user perspective, they can either have the Azure Remote App application. We can see at the minute there is no Minecraft within there. If I go and refresh that collection, it could potentially ask me to sign in again, or not, it's just refreshed it, and now Minecraft's there. So very easy to give applications out to end users. Now, because I'm on Windows 10 as well, if I go and search for something like Minecraft, there we are, it's within the start menu. I should be able to just browse. Recently added is Minecraft. If I go and look for something like eDrawings, there it is again. So I don't necessarily have to use the Azure Remote App. If I was on something like an iPad, then yes, fine, I'm going to have to use that because there is no start menu to integrate with. Now, I'm getting prompted for credentials because I'm not currently sat in the office. The fact that they're about to or not about to, the single sign-on's not there at the minute for this version. But when I do try and connect to it, like I say, I ran it from the start menu. It could have been something that I ran from within here. It'll connect to the application, and up it comes as just an application. There's no desktop behind it where I get that disjarring approach to having to flick between my local applications and something that's published from Azure Remote App. We can see we've got this little icon on. That's about the only main indication that this is not a locally installed application. However, because we are running this in a hybrid deployment model, we can see that I'm actually going back to my file server on premise. So I haven't got network discovery enabled, but rather than just being restricted to just the drives that are on the server, I can browse any UNC path. So if I go to my PON, DML, maybe apps, Oh look, there's all my on-premise applications, or my files should I say. But more specifically, if I go to my PON apps and go into my SB folder, there's my demo file, which should load up a lovely diagram, 3D model of one of them underwater sea scooters. Can't figure a better word there. I can move it around, I can rotate it, so performance is pretty good. And this is over a Wi-Fi signal that's a little bit congested in here as people are connected to it quite significantly. Then I might decide, well actually fine, I want to animate it. So I can kick off that animation, it can be going around quite nicely while I swap to my other device. So, if I swap to my project my screen app, I say yes. Oops. Give the world my PIN number. So, on my phone, I also have the remote preview application. So that thing's busy whirring away in the background. If I add in a new Azure Remote App, I'll sign in as myself. Try that again. Then we need to add an account. Why has it lost all my settings? Do apologise, let me just try signing back out again. I add Azure Remote App. Sign in as me. This was working 30 seconds ago. Just sign out of this one very quickly unless it's deciding to have a slight fit. There we go, closing the app and reopening it always seems to work. So if I go in to that same eDrawings application, so bear in mind this is on my phone at present. I might just take this off the screen for 2 seconds while I type in my corporate password. So this is using my Active Directory account. So this is synchronized up with Azure, but it's in ADFS Federation mode, so that's coming back for it. And we now have that same application. I'm going to find that same file. So this is a 32 or 64-bit Windows app that is now running on my Windows mobile device. So this could be an iOS device. They're going to let me stretch it. Don't suppose I need to get it full screen. And so I can double tap that. That makes it bigger. There we go. Go back, do the same animation. Start the animation. And off it goes. So we have that same application set. It doesn't matter what device I'm using now. I can access it from anywhere. I could be in the middle of doing something. And if I go back, open it on my desktop. So normally a user would probably quit out of it, so I'm just kind of forcing the issue here. If I sign back in on my desktop, I should hijack that session. We can see that's just disconnected. There it's going. Of course I hijacked it, so it's opened up too, but it's still running that same animation that I had running a minute ago on my phone, now back on my desktop. So it's that seamless transition as I'm moving from mobile back into the office again. Now, I mentioned that obviously I was able to go and browse through and find that application and open the file from my local desktop. So you see that I was actually browsing through to my network share. That's because within Azure, we have this virtual network where I have a site-to-site VPN. So I have that networking infrastructure configured so that we're going from external back to on-premise, and I can just access my normal internal resources, my domain controllers for authentication resources. And if I've still got, talk about Remote App, we also use an on-premise version of this as well. So if I load up Configuration Manager really quickly, so because I have the client push or discovery enabled within my environment, it's actually finding them, not domain controllers, sorry, it's finding them remote app servers that are commissioned in the back end. Here they all are with a funny name. So these are domain joined servers that are running my applications, connecting back over a site-to-site VPN from Azure to my on-premise, hence interacting and working as if I was running and managing and maintaining that infrastructure, but without the worry of thinking about the terminal server gateways or the brokers, the gateways, the licensing infrastructure, or even the session hosts. All I'm worried about is maintaining that image, and then every so often coming across into the Azure portal saying update it because I've added some new applications, and then maybe a case of, well, fine, I now want to decide exactly which applications I'm publishing out to which users, and keeping an eye on things like the sessions, who's connected, and making sure that I'm on the right scale service plan, as Phil mentioned earlier on the slides, with basic and the standards. Now seeing the introduction of things like the Premium and the Premium Plus to the actual experience.
So just really kind of giving you that kind of highlight view into the Azure kind of remote app services. So you saw that this is one of the portfolio that Microsoft is introducing in terms of its kind of more modern application access. So whether that be remote desktop sessions, going to full VDI, or something really to give you a quick and powerful way of effectively getting your applications out to users for multiple different scenarios. So like I say, this is something where you do have the options, as in Microsoft, to be deployed in a kind of on-premise, cloud, some levels of mixture between the two if you're leveraging into the infrastructure services for DR type processes. But this is really kind of giving you those types of sides. And I would say that for those users that have got investments in terms of application delivery today, you're going to likely have extended investments on top of the licensing that enables you to do this. So you can certainly look at that. If you have investments in RDS or kind of that kind of remote desktop session licensing, that also gives you options around how commercially you get discount grants against the Azure service if you have that preference to say, you know what, I don't want to necessarily have to worry about all those additional servers and brokers and other bits and pieces. I just want a presentation layer that I can use and flex up and flex down for the different scenarios of use. So hopefully you found that useful, and obviously any questions, we will be kind of putting this up in terms of some of the kind of access as well for resources, because there are some trials that you can very quickly kind of stand up and for basic kind of tests, or we can do some more supported advanced tests for you as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks all.